The hallway smelled like antiseptic and overworked coffee machines. At Blue Ridge General, night shifts had their own kind of silence, the kind that buzzed beneath the surface, like something waiting to be felt. Mac Whitaker didn't belong here anymore. Not really. Not since stepping back from the OR 6 months ago. He wasn't the hands-in kind of doctor now. He was the board member, the donor, the man whose name was etched in brass beside the new cardiac wing. People nodded when they passed him, some with respect, others with a hint of calculation, but no one looked him in the eye anymore. Not really. Not like she did. He hadn't meant to stop. He was just walking past the break room at the tail end of a long check-in with administration. His mind was already halfway to his car, the leather seats, the quiet house up on Chestnut Ridge, but then, through the crack in the door, he heard music. Faint. Something upbeat. Stevie Wonder? He paused. Inside, a young nurse danced barefoot on the tile, her scrubs loose around her frame, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She moved like no one was watching, spinning, laughing softly, arms stretching as if the air around her had shape. There was no performance in it, no audience, just joy. Max stepped back quietly, out of her line of sight. He didn't know her name. He didn't know what made her dance alone in the middle of a night shift. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, he felt something shift in his chest. Not pain, not emptiness, just something that made him breathe a little slower. He didn't linger. He left the hospital like he was supposed to, got into his sleek black Audi, and drove the winding road up to his estate. But the image of her stayed with him. The quiet freedom of her, like a firefly in a glass room. Frankie Carson didn't know she had an audience that night. She wouldn't have danced if she did. It was just something she did when no one was around, when the weight of 12-hour shifts and call buttons and late-night losses got too heavy to hold. Music was her relief valve, a way to breathe when the world felt too tight. She'd learned to dance like that in the tiny living room of her childhood home. Her brother used to play the old stereo and laugh at the way she twirled with her socks sliding across linoleum. He was gone now. 2 years. Cancer didn't care that she was a nurse, or that she begged, or that she believed in medicine. The break room was her church now, her escape. The next morning, Carla nudged her in the locker room. "You've got eyes on you." Frankie blinked, tugging her sweatshirt over her head. "What?" "Dr. Whitaker," Carla whispered like it was a sacred name. "The Mac Whitaker. He came by last night. Didn't say much, but he looked different." Frankie shook her head. "He doesn't know I exist." Carla smirked. "You'd be surprised who notices when you think no one's looking." Mac sat in his home office, overlooking the hills just as the morning mist began to burn off. He sipped black coffee, bitter and hot, and stared at the open laptop screen. His inbox overflowed, investment portfolios, speaking invites. The governor wanted him on a healthcare advisory board. He closed the laptop. He used to be someone. Not in the way people say it when they're nostalgic. He used to be alive. A heart surgeon, hands steady, nerves sharper than the scalpel he held. But 10 years of saving lives had taken pieces of him, one by one. Then the divorce. Then losing his father. Then nothing. Just quiet, wealth, and the echo of everything he couldn't fix. Until her. It was foolish, probably. She was young, vibrant, untouched by the machinery of status and politics. He didn't even know her name until he asked Felix, his assistant, to get the nurse staffing schedule for Cardiac Bay. Subtle, he thought. Felix didn't ask questions, just handed him the schedule with a knowing smile. "Frankie Carson," Mac read aloud to himself. The name settled on his tongue like something familiar, something soft. That evening, Mac returned to the hospital, under the guise of checking on a funding proposal. He hated pretense, but pride was a strange thing, even when you had nothing left to prove. He spotted her outside the cafeteria, sipping tea, eyes scanning a worn paperback. Her sneakers were scuffed, her ID badge crooked, and there was a smudge of pen on her cheek. "Ms. Carson?" he said carefully. Frankie looked up, startled. "Yes." "I'm Dr. Whitaker," he said, though he knew she already knew. "Mind if I sit?" She blinked, then nodded slowly. "Sure. I mean, yes, of course." He took the seat across from her. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to feel like a decision. "I saw you dancing," he said. Frankie's eyes widened. A soft pink rose in her cheeks. "That's incredibly embarrassing." "It wasn't meant to be." He paused. "It was honest, rare." She lowered her eyes, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's how I clear my head. Working nights can get heavy." "I understand." They sat in silence for a beat. "Why are you here?" she asked gently. Not defensive, just curious. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I think I came back to ask you that." Frankie looked up at him, and for the first time she didn't see the millionaire, or the board member, or the name on the cardiac wing. She just saw a man who looked like he hadn't exhaled in a long time. And maybe she knew what that felt like. The next day started like any other. Frankie tied her hair into a messy knot, pulled on her scrubs and stuffed her dance shoes into the side pocket of her bag. A silly habit, maybe, but they gave her comfort, like carrying a piece of light in case the day got dark. But something was different. Her stomach turned slightly as she passed the front lobby of Blue Ridge General and caught sight of the digital donor board. Mac Whitaker, lead benefactor. She exhaled through her nose and shook her head, half laughing to herself. What was that conversation yesterday? What did it even mean? She hadn't been able to sleep, not because of what he said, but because of how he looked at her. Like she mattered, like he wasn't just seeing her dance, he was watching something he didn't even know he missed. "Hey!" Carla's voice snapped her out of her thoughts as she came up beside her with a fresh coffee in hand. "You're quiet." Frankie raised an eyebrow. "You're only saying that because I haven't said anything dumb yet." Carla sipped, then smirked. "Number, I'm saying it because I saw Dr. Mac Almighty stroll into the cardiac wing 15 minutes early this morning. In a suit. A tailored suit." Frankie turned toward her station. Maybe he's got a board meeting. Maybe he's walking past room 237 3 times an hour for a reason. Frankie rolled her eyes, but inside her heart kicked a little faster. She hated how Carla always saw right through her, and worse, how she might be right. By mid-morning, she was elbow-deep in patient charts and medication logs when she caught sight of him again. Just for a second. Mac walked past the nurse's station, offered a nod, and lingered. Not long enough to say anything, but long enough to leave something hanging in the air. Frankie didn't look up until he was gone. Mac paced the hallway 2 floors above, pretending to review the new ER blueprint, while his mind kept drifting back downstairs. To her, Frankie Carson. He had never done this before, this quiet circling, the waiting. He was used to control, to confidence, to walking into any room, knowing who he was and why he was there. But this felt unfamiliar. At lunch, Delia called. He hesitated before answering. "You're quiet," she said. "Everyone keeps saying that lately," Mac muttered. She paused. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Liar," she shot back. "What's her name?" Mac sighed, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and leaned against the window that overlooked the hospital gardens. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me." He hesitated, then spoke. "She's a nurse. She danced in the break room like nobody was watching. I was, and now I can't stop thinking about her." Delia was silent for a moment. Then, "Oh, Mac!" "What?" "You don't fall for people. You analyze them. This is different." "I know." There was another pause. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. That's what scares me." Later that afternoon, Frankie walked into the small back garden behind the staff lounge, hoping to catch a break and just breathe. She sat on the edge of a bench, shoes off, bare feet pressing into the grass. The sun was starting to drop, golden and soft, and for a moment everything felt still. Then she heard the soft crunch of footsteps on gravel. She turned, and there he was. Max stood there, hands tucked into his pockets, looking like he wasn't entirely sure he should be. The wind caught the edge of his blazer. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed something unguarded. "Is this a bad time?" he asked. Frankie looked down at her feet, then back up. "Number just trying to catch my balance." He nodded once, then stepped closer. "Mind if I join you?" She hesitated, then gestured to the other side of the bench. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't feel awkward, just real. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, "if I made you uncomfortable yesterday." "You didn't," she replied softly. "I just wasn't expecting it." "Neither was I." Frankie looked at him then, really looked. There was something tired around his eyes, something that said he carried more than he let on. "Why were you here?" she asked. "Because I needed to see something that wasn't wrapped in performance or strategy or people trying to impress me." She blinked. "You reminded me what that looked like." Frankie's throat tightened slightly, but she managed a small smile. "Well, I wasn't exactly auditioning." "I know," he said. "That's what made it matter." The words hung between them, delicate and deliberate. She folded her hands in her lap. "I'm not used to this." "To what?" "Being noticed by someone like you." He tilted his head. "What does that mean?" "Someone like me." She exhaled. "We come from different worlds, Doctor. Whitaker." "Mac," he said gently. "Mac," she repeated quieter. "I mean, I clock in. You're on a board. You own half this hospital's nameplates. We don't exactly orbit the same sun." Max smiled, faint but sincere. "Maybe I'm tired of my orbit." Frankie looked at him, a flicker of something uncertain in her eyes. "I don't know what you want from me." He looked down at his hands. "Neither do I. But I know I don't want to walk away from something just because it's unexpected." She swallowed, heart knocking hard against her ribs. "What if I'm not ready?" "Then I wait," he said simply. Frankie turned her gaze back toward the sky. The clouds were soft and gold-edged, her bare toes curled into the grass. There were no clear answers here, no polished moments. Just two people sitting side by side, both wondering what the next breath would mean. After a long pause, she murmured, "I don't know where this goes." He smiled, not pushing. "Me neither." But neither of them stood up. By the end of the week, the air between them had shifted. Not drastically, nothing spoken outright, but something unspoken had started to stretch and breathe. Like a room where someone had finally opened a window. Frankie could feel it everywhere. In the way Mac's eyes searched for hers in the hallway. Not boldly, but intentionally. In how his voice softened when they crossed paths. And in the way her thoughts lingered longer than she wanted, wondering what he was doing when he wasn't here, when she wasn't dancing in break rooms or poring over charts. Still, she kept her walls high. It was Friday night, and most of the staff was either scrambling to finish up their shifts or planning post-work drinks. Frankie, as usual, opted for neither. She stayed behind at the patient garden, arranging the lavender bed that always got trampled by the kids visiting their grandparents. She liked doing things no one asked her to do. It felt like quiet rebellion. "I figured I might find you here," Max said from behind her. Frankie didn't turn right away. She finished patting the soil, brushing dirt from her fingertips, then rose slowly. "That obvious?" "Not obvious," he said, "but consistent." She smiled faintly, brushing her palms off on her scrubs. "Most people go out on Friday nights." "I'm not most people." "Yeah," she said under her breath. "I noticed." Mac held out 2 takeaway coffee cups. "Peace offering. 1 cinnamon. Carla said it's your weakness." Frankie hesitated, then took it. She really needs to learn how to keep secrets. They sat on the low stone ledge beside the herb patch. Crickets hummed in the distance, and the warm breeze felt like something pulled from a southern postcard. Max sipped slowly. Frankie watched him out of the corner of her eye. "You always this hands-on?" she asked finally. He glanced over. "With what? With people you don't know?" A pause. "No," he said honestly. "You're the exception." She didn't answer. Her fingers fidgeted with the coffee lid. After a long stretch of quiet, he added, "You don't trust people easily." Is that a question or a statement? "Observation." Frankie let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "I trust patience. I trust my best friend. I trust the morning shift to be late." He smiled. "But not me." She looked at him then. "You've got a life I can't imagine. You sit on hospital boards. People move when you speak. I dance in break rooms and barely pay rent. I don't care about any of that," he said gently. "Well, I do," she replied, eyes flashing, not with anger, but honesty. "Because people like you don't just notice people like me. And when they do, it's not for long." He leaned in slightly, not closer, but deeper, like he wanted to meet her where she was. "You think I'm here because I need to fill some space in my day. I'm not." "Then why are you?" she whispered. "Because you make everything quieter in my head, and I don't even know how you do it." She didn't expect that. Her grip tightened around the coffee cup, grounding herself. Mac continued, voice softer now. "I spent years being important in rooms that didn't feed me. I was good at my job. I was respected. But I stopped feeling anything until you." Frankie blinked, not because she didn't believe him, but because she did. And that was scarier than anything. "I don't know how to hold that," she said quietly. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just let it be real." They sat like that for a while. The kind of silence that hums, not heavy, not hollow, just full. Then, movement near the hospital wing caught their attention. Carla. She spotted them and froze mid-step. Then with a slow smirk, she waved dramatically and walked inside. Frankie groaned. "Great. The hospital grapevine will have this spread before sunrise." Mac chuckled. "Let them talk." But Frankie wasn't laughing. She stood brushing off her pants, suddenly uneasy. "I should go check on the pediatric meds inventory," she said quickly. "It was overdue." "Frankie." She stopped but didn't turn. "I'm not going to push you," he said. "But I'm not walking away either." She didn't answer. She just nodded and disappeared into the corridor. The next morning the air was thicker, emotionally, not just from the southern humidity. Carla leaned on the nurse's desk with a too big smile. "So, garden benches, twilight coffee, deep stares." Frankie groaned. "Please stop." "Look, I'm not saying go buy a white dress," Carla teased. "But the man looks at you like you're a sunrise." "That doesn't make it simple," Frankie muttered, flipping through patient records. "Number, but it makes it real." Frankie didn't respond. But later, when she opened her locker, she found a note tucked beneath her shift schedule. "Room 312, noon. Only if you want to. No flowers, no grand gestures. Just choice." Frankie stood there, holding the note in both hands, her heart rattling like a bird against glass. She didn't know what she'd say, or what would happen if she walked into that room, but she knew one thing. She was going. Room 312 was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you wonder if you were supposed to be there at all. Frankie stood outside the door, fingers grazing the note again. Creased now, soft at the edges from where she'd folded and unfolded it too many times. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but she hadn't changed. She told Carla she needed to check on supply orders, but her palms were sweating and her stomach kept flipping in slow, uneven waves. She almost turned back twice. Almost. But then she took a breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. Mac was standing near the window. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a white button-down, with the sleeves rolled, the collar undone. There was something quieter about him, more undone than usual, like he'd taken off his armor and left it outside the room. He turned when he heard the door, his expression unreadable, not surprised, not expectant, just present. Frankie closed the door behind her. "You came," he said, voice low. "I wasn't sure I would," she replied. "I wasn't sure you would either." Another pause. She shifted slightly, unsure whether to sit or stand or speak or run. "I'm not good at this," she admitted. "At what?" "This." She motioned between them. "Whatever this is becoming." "I'm not asking you to be good at it," he said. "I'm asking you to be honest about how it makes you feel." She looked at him then. Really looked. "Like I'm walking a tightrope with no net." He stepped forward slightly, not too close. "And what's waiting on the other side?" "I don't know," she said, "but I'm scared to find out." He nodded, like he understood more than she said, then walked over to a small side table and picked up 2 mugs, paper, from the downstairs cafe. "I didn't know what kind of tea you'd want," he said, "so I brought 3. Green, peppermint, and something labeled Sleepy Moonlight, that I'm pretty sure smells like bath water." Frankie blinked, then laughed. Sharp, sudden, real. Mac grinned, just slightly. "There she is." She took the green tea. They sat across from each other in the small consultation room, elbows resting on the table like kids at detention. "So," she said after a few quiet sips, "what is this? Between us?" Mac didn't answer immediately. He turned his mug slowly in his hands, then looked up. "I think it's a beginning," he said. "I think it's fragile. I think it's not something I want to rush or label too soon, but it's something I don't want to walk away from." Frankie's lips pressed together. Her mind kept circling the same doubts, age, position, perception. But those thoughts were getting harder to hold on to in the face of the way he looked at her, like she was something rare, something he didn't expect, but deeply valued. "I've built walls," she whispered. "Thick ones, after losing my brother, after being told by someone I loved that I grieve too loudly. I stopped letting people in." His expression softened. He was wrong. She looked away. He wasn't the first. Then they were all wrong. Silence again. This time not uncomfortable, just full. "You're not just here for the coffee, are you?" she asked. He leaned back slightly, eyes warm. "Number, I'm here because you changed something in me I didn't know needed changing." Frankie's eyes burned suddenly. She blinked fast, shaking her head with a shaky smile. "You shouldn't say things like that unless you mean them." "I don't say anything I don't mean." She looked at him, and then said the one thing she'd been holding in her chest like a knot. "I'm terrified." He nodded slowly. "So am I." Neither of them moved. Then his voice dropped, steady but gentle. "You don't have to fall, not today, not tomorrow, but maybe just lean a little." Her throat caught, so she did. Not into his arms, not across the table, but into the space between them. She let her guard slip an inch. Her smile came slower, deeper. She didn't flinch when his hand brushed hers, just barely, and rested there without pressure. They stayed like that, hands lightly touching over tea. A quiet room holding 2 people on the edge of something new. Then came the knock. The door opened halfway before Frankie could speak. Delia stepped in, eyebrows raised. "Well, this is not where I expected to find my brother." Frankie froze, pulling her hand back instinctively. Mac looked over calmly. "Delia," he said. "You're early." "I'm nosy," she corrected, then turned to Frankie with a smile that wasn't cruel, but wasn't exactly warm either. "And you must be the nurse." Frankie stood up slowly, professionalism washing over her like armor. "Frankie Carson, night shift." Delia offered a handshake that was firm and fast. "Mac's sister. I like to know the people who make him smile like a teenager." Frankie flushed. "I should go," she said, grabbing her bag. Mac stood. You don't have to. It's okay. Frankie offered a small smile. I'll see you around. She slipped out the door, heart racing, eyes wide, skin prickling with the burn of exposure. Delia turned to Mac as the door clicked shut. She's something. She's not a something, Mac said. She's someone. Delia folded her arms, studied him. Just be sure you know what you're doing. So do I, he said, for the first time in a long time. And behind that closed door, Frankie leaned against the cool wall of the hallway, trying to calm her breathing. One part of her heart was still inside that room, and the other part didn't want to take it back. It had been 3 days since the quiet moment in room 312. 3 days since Frankie had touched his hand, heard his sister's voice, and walked away feeling more exposed than she had in years. And now, back in the rhythm of night shifts, alarms, and charts, she was doing her best to pretend she was fine, but pretending had a way of fraying at the seams. She was restocking IV bags in the supply room when Carla slipped in behind her and shut the door with a soft click. You're acting weird, Carla said. Frankie didn't look up. I'm always weird. Number your Iusha? I kissed a rich doctor's soul, and now I'm spiraling weird. Frankie turned, a sharp breath escaping through her nose. It wasn't a kiss. No, it was worse. Emotional vulnerability, eye contact. Carla crossed her arms. Spill it. Frankie hesitated, then leaned against the metal shelf. I like him, not just like, I feel something real, which is terrifying. Carla softened. And I met his sister, Delia. She walked in on us like a plot twist. Carla winced. Oof. She was polite, but I felt like I'd wandered into a room I didn't belong in. Carla studied her. Maybe you didn't wander. Maybe you were invited. Frankie didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the shelf. Do you think I'm kidding myself? No, Carla said. But I think you're afraid he'll wake up one morning and remember you're not part of his world. Frankie's silence was her answer. Later that night, while checking on a patient in recovery, Frankie glanced out into the hallway and froze. Mac was there, not in a suit, not in dress shoes. He wore jeans, a navy sweater, and that same unreadable expression that made her breath catch. He held a small paper bag in one hand and leaned against the wall like he wasn't entirely sure what he was doing there. She stepped out into the hall quietly, closing the door behind her. Hi, she said, trying not to sound surprised. Hi, he replied. You're working late. I always work late. He held up the bag. There's a bakery near Chestnut Street. You mentioned once that cinnamon scones remind you of your mum. They had a few left. Her heart squeezed. You remembered that? I remember everything you say. The quiet in the hallway suddenly felt thick, charged. I wanted to see you, he added. Frankie glanced around. It's not really a good time. He nodded, but didn't move. I know. I just couldn't go another day not knowing where we stand. Her throat tightened. You're the first person in a long time who sees me like I'm more than a job title, but that doesn't mean this isn't complicated. I don't want to make your life harder, Frankie. But you are, she whispered. You're making me want things I don't know how to ask for. They stood there for a breath. 2, 3. Then Mac's voice dropped, just above a whisper. Let me show you something. She hesitated. Now? 10 minutes, he promised. You can clock out after your rounds. I'll wait outside. And just like that, he walked away. She found him leaning on the hood of his car under a street lamp near the visitor lot. His sweater was dusted with night air, and his expression was calmer now, like the storm of needing her had settled into a quiet kind of knowing. He opened the passenger door for her. She slid in. I don't know where we're going, she said. You don't have to, he replied. They didn't talk much during the drive. He turned onto a winding back road just outside of Asheville, the trees tall and dark around them. Finally, they pulled into a small gravel drive tucked behind what looked like a quiet studio space. low lights glowing in the windows, music playing faintly inside. "What is this?" she asked. "My place," he said. "The part no one sees." She stepped out slowly. The air was cooler here, laced with pine and something like paint thinner. When she followed him through the door, she stopped. The room was small, but full of life. Canvases leaned against every wall, some half-finished, some abstract and wild, others soft and dreamlike. There were sketches on the floor, brushes in jars, music playing from an old speaker in the corner. "You paint?" "Not well," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But it helps. When I stopped operating, I needed something that kept my hands moving." She walked toward a canvas near the window. It was pale blue and soft gold. Waves, maybe, or mountains. "It's beautiful," she said. He stepped behind her, not touching, just near enough to feel. "I brought you here because I needed you to see this part of me, the one that isn't polished or powerful, just real." She turned slowly to face him. "I don't want you to impress me, Mac," she said. "I want you to be honest with me." "I'm trying," he whispered. "And I know this, whatever this is, scares you. But it scares me too." Frankie's voice trembled. "You have a life full of structure. I'm just trying to pay rent and not lose patients I care too much about." "That's why I see you," he said. "Because you care too much. Because you feel things so deeply, and you don't even realize that's what makes you extraordinary." Her eyes met his. She didn't step away. "What happens next?" she asked. He shook his head. "I don't know, but I want to find out. With you." She looked around the studio, then back at him. "I can't promise anything," she said. "I'm not asking you to," he replied. Silence filled the space again, not empty, not cold. She stepped closer, and this time, when their hands met, neither of them pulled away. The air inside the studio still held the faint scent of oil paint and lavender soap, soft and strange. Frankie stood in the middle of it, her fingers lightly intertwined with Mac's, her breath uneven but steadying. She had no idea how long they stood like that. Two people in a space neither of them had planned for, but both had clearly needed. "I wasn't ready for any of this," she said finally, eyes low. Mac's voice was quiet, close. "Neither was I." His hand was warm, present, not pressing or pulling, just there, like a lighthouse you didn't realize you'd been swimming toward. Frankie eased away gently, not to distance herself, but to look at him. Really look. It's a beautiful place. The art, the silence, it feels unfiltered. "That's what I come here for," he said, "to stop performing." "Is that what you feel like the rest of the time? That you're performing?" He nodded once. "When you carry a name, a title, a legacy, you learn how to wear it well enough that people stop asking what's underneath." She nodded. "I get that." Mac tilted his head. "Do you?" Frankie hesitated. "People look at me and see a nurse. They don't see the sister who sat in oncology rooms every week for 2 years, or the girl who gave up a scholarship to stay close to home, or the woman who's terrified of letting someone in, because the last time she did he said I was too heavy to carry emotionally." Mac's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in that deep, unspoken ache of recognition. He was wrong. She smiled softly. "Everyone keeps saying that. Maybe because it's true." Frankie looked down at her shoes, then back up. "I'm not perfect, Mac. I get overwhelmed. I overthink. I cry when no one's looking, and sometimes when they are. I'm not built for polished lives and perfectly timed dinner parties." His voice dropped. "Neither am I." They stood in stillness, the studio lights warm above them. A song played low in the background, something bluesy and raw. Without a word, Mac reached out a hand. She hesitated, then took it. They didn't speak. They just moved, slowly, quietly, rocking side to side as the music filled the room. It wasn't a dance in the traditional sense, There was no rhythm to match, no steps to count, just movement and breath and being. "You're full of surprises," she murmured. "I was thinking the same about you." She laughed softly, resting her forehead against his shoulder for a beat before pulling back. "I should go." He didn't try to stop her. He just nodded, his expression unreadable but warm. "Will I see you tomorrow?" She started toward the door, pausing as her hand touched the knob. "Probably." He smiled faintly. "I'll take probably." The next morning, Frankie stepped into the hospital cafeteria, half expecting the spell to have broken overnight. That whatever strange, fragile thing had formed between them would feel awkward or distant by the cold light of day. But it didn't. It deepened. Mac was there, standing near the window with a cup of coffee and a tired half-smile. When he saw her, something changed in his posture, barely visible but unmistakable. His shoulders eased, his eyes lit, like just seeing her made the day start softer. But they weren't alone. Delia stood at the counter, ordering espresso and watching her brother with the sharp gaze of someone who noticed everything and forgot nothing. Frankie moved toward the nurse's table, feeling her pulse tick up. Carla caught her glance and leaned in. "She's back, huh?"
"Yeah. Brace yourself."
Sure enough, Delia appeared a moment later, her heels clicking softly on the tile. She stopped in front of Frankie's table, her tone polite but too perfectly measured. "Frankie, right?" Frankie stood, matching her energy with polite professionalism. "Yes, good morning." Delia smiled. "Mind if I sit?" Frankie hesitated. "Of course." Delia didn't waste time. "I came to visit Mac. He's been different lately, more open. I assume that's you." Frankie didn't respond. Delia folded her hands. "I'm protective of my brother. We grew up around people who liked the idea of him more than the man himself." Frankie nodded slowly. "I'm not interested in his title." "Good." Delia's smile didn't falter, "because it comes with a spotlight, and spotlights aren't always kind." "I'm not afraid of light," Frankie said, quietly but clearly. Delia studied her for a beat, then, surprisingly, softened. "He trusts you. That says more than anything else ever could." Frankie's guard didn't drop, but her shoulders loosened. "I care about him, a lot, but I'm still figuring out what that means." Delia nodded. "So is he." Then she stood. "I just needed to see it for myself." As she walked away, Frankie exhaled, deep and slow. Carla whistled. "Well, that wasn't terrifying at all." "She's not wrong," Frankie murmured. "Liking someone like Mac, it's not simple." "Nope," Carla said, sipping her coffee. "But it looks like it might be worth it." That evening, as Frankie left the hospital, she found a small envelope taped to her locker. Inside was a folded note in Mac's handwriting. "Dinner? Just you, me, and the moonlight. No pressure, no expectations, just a little more time." She smiled, tucking the note into her jacket pocket. And for the first time in a long time, the idea of letting someone in didn't feel like weakness. It felt like hope. The drive to Mac's home felt quieter than usual, though the world outside was bursting with color. Twilight settling like warm ink over the mountains, the trees painted in soft amber and dusk. Frankie sat in the passenger seat, her fingers curled lightly around the note he'd left in her locker, now folded neatly in her pocket like a talisman. She didn't know what tonight would be. She just knew she wanted to be there. Mac glanced over at her once, just briefly, then focused back on the road. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Frankie nodded. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind. Want to talk about it?" She hesitated. "Maybe once we're sitting still." He smiled faintly, accepting her answer without pressing. That was one of the things she was starting to learn about him. He asked, but never forced. When they pulled into the gravel drive outside his mountain home, the sky was the color of melted copper. Lights glowed warm from the windows. Soft music leaked faintly through the walls, and something about it all felt intentional, thoughtful. He opened the door for her, not out of habit but care. She stepped inside and was immediately hit by the scent of roasted garlic, rosemary, and something lemony. "You cooked?" she asked, raising an eyebrow.
"I attempted,"
he said. "There's a fire extinguisher within arm's reach just in case." She laughed softly and followed him into the kitchen. The table had been set. Nothing fancy. Just 2 plates, cloth napkins, a candle burning low in the center like a heartbeat. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," Max said, pulling out a chair for her. "You've given me your time. I wanted to give you mine." They ate slowly, the kind of meal where the food wasn't the focus. There were small moments, glances, shared silences that felt fuller than words. And when the plates were cleared and the tea was poured, Mac leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You seemed distracted earlier." Frankie met his eyes. "Delia's right. About this being complicated." He didn't flinch. "It is. I mean, I'm a nurse, you're..." "You!" Mac's gaze didn't shift. "And who do you think I am?" She gave a half smile. "Exactly. I don't know yet." He nodded. "That's fair." She looked down at her tea, the steam curling between her fingers. "You're the first person I've let in since Nathan." The name sat there like a stone dropped into still water. Mac's voice was gentle. "Nathan? My ex," she said. "We were together 4 years. He was kind at first. Then came the guilt trips, the passive digs. When my brother got sick, I leaned on him. Too much, probably. He didn't like that. Said I was emotionally exhausting. Left me 2 months after the funeral." Mac didn't interrupt. Just let her speak. "I told myself I was okay, that I'd learned to depend only on myself, that love was this shiny thing I didn't need anymore." She swallowed hard. "But then you showed up, with your quiet eyes, and your cinnamon tea, and your stupid handwritten notes." He smiled gently. "Stupid?" Frankie looked at him, her voice soft but sure. "They undid me." There was a long pause. "I don't want to break you open just to walk away," he said finally. "Then don't," she whispered. He reached across the table, palm up. She slid her hand into his without hesitation. They sat like that, tethered. After a moment, Mac rose and walked to the living room, returning with a small object wrapped in brown paper. "I was going to wait," he said, "but I think it belongs to you now." She took it carefully, unwrapping it to reveal a small canvas, her dancing in the break room, abstract but unmistakable. Soft swirls of blue and gold framed the silhouette of a woman, mid-spin, arms open like she was flying. Frankie stared at it for a long moment. "You painted this?" "I tried," he said. "I wanted to remember the first time I saw you, not because of how you looked, but because of how you made me feel." She didn't speak, couldn't. Tears gathered slowly, but didn't fall. Instead, she stood, walked around the table and wrapped her arms around him, not out of politeness or expectation, but need. His arms circled her waist, holding her gently, steadily. "I'm scared," she whispered into his chest. "Me too," he murmured, "but I think that's how we know it's real." They didn't move for a while. The music played on, the candle flickered low, and in that quiet house, something deeper than words settled between them. Not a promise, not yet, but the beginning of one. Rain tapped against the hospital windows like a soft metronome, steady and thoughtful. Frankie stood at the nurse's station early Monday morning, trying to shake off the weight in her chest, the kind of weight that didn't come from exhaustion, but from wondering how long something beautiful could last before the world stepped in and complicated it. She hadn't seen Max since that night in his kitchen. That hug, that silence, it wasn't avoidance. He'd texted short and sincere messages that asked nothing of her, but always ended with, "Whenever you're ready." And she appreciated it, respected it, but it still rattled something loose in her chest. "Your face is doing that thing again," Carla said, nudging her shoulder with a file folder. "What thing?" "The I'm thinking about Iman but pretending I'm thinking about inventory thing." Frankie sighed. It's just a lot. Too much? I don't know yet. Carla leaned closer, dropping her voice. You're allowed to be happy, you know. Frankie glanced around, her voice just a whisper. It's not that simple, Car.
Nothing good ever is.
Before Frankie could respond, Dr. Kendall from Pediatrics walked by with a nod. Morning, Frankie. By the way, Mac Whitaker dropped off that grant paperwork. Said he wanted it personally handed to you. Frankie blinked. He did? Left it an hour ago. Didn't want to disturb your shift. She walked over to her locker, and sure enough, there was a folder tucked just inside. Inside the folder was a typed memo about a new wellness initiative for nurses, funding for mental health days, therapy stipends, creative workshops. At the bottom, in Mac's handwriting, for the ones who carry more than they show, inspired by one who dances when no one's watching. She closed the folder gently and held it against her chest. That evening, Frankie wandered into the break room. Not to dance, not even to decompress, but to think, alone. She turned the lights low, music off, and stared out at the city blinking through the rain. Then the door creaked open. She turned, startled. Max stood there, damp from the weather, his coat folded over one arm. I know this was your space first, he said, but I was hoping you'd let me borrow a corner of it. Frankie softened. It's not mine. Just sacred territory. He stepped inside, quietly, slowly, like someone walking into a memory. I didn't mean to make things heavier for you. You didn't. You've been quiet. I've been overwhelmed. He nodded, not taking it personally. I get that. Frankie reached for her water bottle, twisting the cap like it might anchor her. The initiative you started, for the nurses, thank you. I didn't do it for thanks. She looked at him. Then why? He exhaled. Because I've watched you give pieces of yourself to people without asking for anything in return. Because I didn't know what else to do with how you've made me feel. Frankie swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. You're doing everything right, Mac. That's what's scary. He moved a little closer. Can I ask you something? Always. Is there space in your life for someone like me? Frankie's heart caught in her throat. She looked away, hands trembling just slightly. I don't know. Not because you're not worth it, but because I've lived so long, building everything by myself, I don't know how to let someone help carry it. Mac nodded, slow and sure. Then let me start small. Let me carry the quiet with you. She looked back at him. The break room buzzed with silence, rain tapping the windows like a second heartbeat. Okay, she said. Mac stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. They stood there for a moment, neither reaching out, neither retreating, just standing in the stillness of something not quite spoken, but understood. Then, gently, Frankie leaned forward and rested her head against his shoulder, and Mac, quietly, without needing anything back, rested his cheek against her hair. They didn't dance, but they didn't need to. The sky was the color of steel as dawn crept over Asheville, casting soft shadows over the hospital's west wing. Frankie sat on a bench just outside the staff exit, arms wrapped around her knees, her scrubs still warm from a long night shift. The breeze had a bite to it, like it hadn't quite decided if winter was ready to let go. She hadn't gone home. She couldn't. Something inside her felt unsteady. The night had been relentless. Back-to-back traumas, a pediatric code blue, a family wailing in the hallway. And even though she'd held it together through every moment, every protocol, every hushed prayer behind her mask, now, sitting here, she felt it breaking. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She hadn't cried, not yet, but the tears were hovering in that fragile place just behind her eyes, waiting for permission. Frankie! His voice was quiet, familiar. She turned. Max stood a few feet away, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and wearing an expression that saw more than she wanted anyone to see. "How'd you know I was here?" she asked. I didn't, he said, stepping closer. I just hoped. He handed her the coffee. She took it with both hands like it was something sacred. You okay? He asked. She nodded quickly, then shook her head. No. Max sat beside her, not touching, just close enough to let her feel not alone. Frankie stared at the steam rising from her cup. We lost a little girl last night, 6 years old. Her mum kept asking if we'd made a mistake, if she should have brought her in sooner. I didn't have any answers. I still don't. Mac didn't respond with a solution. He didn't reach for her or try to make it better. He just let the silence wrap around them like a blanket. Finally, she spoke again. I keep wondering how much of myself I can give before I don't have anything left. You don't have to give everything, he said gently. It feels like I do, she whispered, because if I don't care enough, I feel cold. And if I care too much, I feel like I'm drowning. He turned toward her. You're allowed to break, Frankie. You're allowed to say you've reached your edge. Her eyes welled and she blinked fast, fighting it. I don't want to fall apart in front of you. I'd rather see the real you falling apart, Max said, than a perfect version, pretending everything's fine. Her shoulders finally gave. A small broken breath slipped out, and then, just like that, she let herself lean sideways, just enough to let her head rest against his shoulder. Mac didn't speak. He just exhaled slowly and shifted slightly to support her, like her weight was something familiar. They sat like that as the morning grew louder around them. Cars humming, doors opening, nurses greeting each other with exhausted smiles. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't move away either. Later that afternoon, Frankie sat in the back corner of the staff lounge, notebook in hand, sketching out the edges of an idea that had been forming in her mind for weeks. Dance therapy for patients, especially children, a way to bring joy, release, movement to places that felt too still. The hospital had space. The community center had asked her once to volunteer, but now maybe it could be more. Carla dropped into the seat beside her and stole one of her crackers. You're glowing, Carla said. I'm not glowing, Frankie replied. You are, not like post-vacation glowing, like something inside you cracked open and a little light escaped. Frankie rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. It's been a hard day. Still, something's different. Frankie hesitated. He found me this morning. I didn't tell him I needed him. He just showed up. Carla smiled. That's what real ones do. Frankie looked down at her notebook. I want to build something that helps people hold joy again, even for a few minutes. Carla leaned over to look. You think Mac would fund it? Frankie paused. That's the thing. I want it to be mine. Not a gift, not a favor. I want to know I can stand on my own feet before I let someone sweep in and build it for me. Carla tilted her head. You're allowed to let people help, Frankie. I know, she said quietly, but I want to meet him halfway, not be carried. That evening, as the sky turned a velvety indigo, Frankie knocked gently on Mac's studio door. He opened it, looking surprised, then immediately stepped aside to let her in. She walked straight to the table, pulled out her notebook, and laid it in front of him. I want to start something, she said. Dance therapy for children recovering from trauma, long-term illness, even grief. I want it to be real, not just something I dream about on my lunch break. Mac looked at the sketches, the notes, the passion written in every line, then back at her. I want to help, he said. I know, she replied, but I need to know I can do this because it matters, not because I matter to you. Mac's gaze didn't shift. Frankie, you've already done more for me than I know how to explain, but I respect what you're saying, and I'll wait until you're ready. She stepped closer. I'm not saying I don't want your support, she said. I'm saying I want to learn how to accept it without feeling like I'm losing myself. Then let me support you in the way you ask, he said, and nothing more. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. You're hard to resist, you know. I'm not trying to be. I think that's the problem, she whispered, smiling, and just like that, the distance between them disappeared. She reached for his hand this time, and he let her. The sun had barely crested over the Blue Ridge Mountains when Frankie stood outside the hospital's west courtyard, phone pressed to her ear, heart racing. The voicemail tone beeped, and her breath caught. Hi, it's Frankie. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm doing something new, something important. You used to tell me I had too many ideas and not enough time. I'm finally giving one of them a real shot. Just thought you'd want to know. That's all. She hung up and slipped the phone into her pocket, eyes trailing the soft golden light stretching across the garden. The message wasn't for anyone who'd call back. Nathan hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but somehow she needed to say it, to say that she was doing something without him, and not because she was trying to move on, because she already had. Inside, the hospital buzzed with its usual rhythm. Monitors, footsteps, soft voices behind drawn curtains. But there was something different about today. Frankie felt it in her chest, like a string had been pushed tight and now hummed with possibility. At noon, she stepped into the main conference room where a small team from the wellness committee had gathered. She'd been invited to present her pilot idea for the dance therapy program. Her palms were damp. Her heart was loud. Mac was already there, seated in the back. He didn't smile too wide, didn't wave. He just looked at her like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Frankie stood at the front of the room and opened her notebook. My name is Frankie Carson, she began. I've worked at Blue Ridge General for 3 years. I've danced since I was 6, cried in this break room more times than I can count, and watched more children carry pain than any adult ever should. The room grew still. I'm not here as an expert. I'm here as a witness. Movement saved me. When my brother was dying, it was the only thing that made me feel human. When I thought I'd lost myself, it brought me back, and I've seen it. What even the smallest moment of release can do for a child stuck in a hospital room. She clicked to a photo slide of a small dance space she'd sketched, mirrors, mats, natural light. I want to pilot a program for pediatric and long-term care patients, voluntary, gentle, focused on connection, not choreography. I've secured an art therapy consultant. I've drafted partnerships with local dance teachers willing to volunteer. I just need the hospital to believe it's worth trying. Silence followed. Then someone cleared their throat. Dr. Latham, one of the board members, leaned forward. This would require budget reallocations. Volunteers are great, but there's liability, schedule coordination.
I understand, Frankie said. That's why I'm not asking for full rollout, just a 2-month trial. 1 room, 1 hour, once a week. Let us prove it works.
Dr. Latham looked toward Mac, who said nothing, offering no sway, no push. The room murmured. Heads nodded slowly. Questions followed, reasonable ones, logistics, safety, insurance. She answered all of them, steady but honest. And when it was done, she stood a little taller. The committee adjourned. The votes would take a few days. But Mac stayed behind. As the others trickled out, he walked toward her with a quiet pride behind his eyes. You didn't need me in that room, he said. No, she replied, but I liked knowing you were in it. He nodded, the kind of nod that held something heavier than approval. I'm proud of you, Frankie. She swallowed. I'm not used to hearing that. Well, he said gently, get used to it. She laughed softly and leaned against the edge of the table. I'm scared. Again. Of what? Of failing. Of it not being enough. He stepped closer. Even if it only reaches 1 kid, it'll be enough. Her eyes flicked up to meet his. How do you always know exactly what to say?
I don't, he said, voice low. I just listen harder when it's you.
She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. And for the first time since this whole thing began, it wasn't about the tension or the worry or the fear. It was about the stillness that came when two people chose the same thing at the same time. He brushed his thumb over her knuckles. "Dinner tonight?" he asked. She nodded. "But I'm picking the place." "Deal." As they walked down the hall together, something in her heart shifted. Not as a revelation, but as a quiet knowing. She wasn't just being seen, she was being believed in. And that changed everything. The email came in at 6:17 a.m., just as Frankie was tying her shoes by the window, watching the fog roll in over the hills. One line in the subject line stopped her breath. Dance Wellness Initiative. Committee decision. Her hands froze mid-lace. She stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before opening it. It was a yes. Conditional. Cautious. Trial only. But still. A yes. A laugh broke from her, sudden and breathless, and she clapped a hand over her mouth, tears rushing forward before she could catch them. For a second she just sat there, the sunlight catching the corner of her phone, warm and golden and unreal. She didn't call anyone. Not yet. She needed to sit in it first. Let it be hers before she shared it. By noon, word had made its way through the nurse's lounge, the admin wing, and into the clattering coffee chatter in the break room. Carla intercepted her at the vending machine. "You did it!" Frankie blinked. "How do you know?" "Please." Latham's assistant told Dr. Chen, who told Maria, who texted me before I finished brushing my teeth. "We work in a hospital. Secrets don't last." Frankie smiled. "It's just a pilot." "It's your pilot. That's not small, Frankie. That's legacy stuff." She tried to respond, but the door opened and Delia walked in, heels sharp, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the room like she was entering a boardroom instead of a break space. She caught sight of Frankie and walked straight over. "Congratulations," Delia said. Frankie stood up a little straighter. "Thank you. I won't pretend I wasn't hesitant when you entered my brother's life." Frankie's smile faded slightly, guarded. "But I've seen the way he looks at you," Delia continued. "And more importantly, I've seen the way you look at him. Like he's not a title or a dollar sign, like he's just a man." "He is just a man," Frankie said gently. Delia paused. Something unreadable flickered across her face. "I wasn't always brave enough to believe that for myself, but I'm glad someone is." Frankie watched her walk away. Something loosening in her chest she hadn't even realized was wound so tight. That evening, Mac met her at the dance studio she'd rented on the edge of town. A small, bright room with tall windows and scuffed wooden floors. The space still smelled faintly of sweat and lemon cleaner. "This is it?" he asked, stepping inside, eyes sweeping the room. "This is it," she said. He looked around, then back at her. "It's perfect." She laughed. "It's small. That's not a flaw. It's all I could afford. It's exactly what it needs to be." She turned on the speaker in the corner, letting soft music filter through the space. Nothing dramatic, just something slow and real. "You want to see how it'll work?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "You're going to make me dance again, aren't you?" "Always." She offered her hand, and this time he took it without hesitation. They moved slowly, no choreography, just steps in time with something deeper than rhythm. Her head found his shoulder. His hand settled gently against her back. "This is the part where I'm supposed to say, 'I'm proud of you again,'" he murmured. She smiled. "You don't have to." "I want to." They swayed in silence, light casting long shadows on the floor. Frankie let her eyes close, breathing in the moment like she was afraid it would vanish if she looked too long. Then her phone buzzed. She reached into her bag without pulling away and glanced at the screen. Her stomach dropped. "What is it?" Mac asked, his voice tightening. Frankie handed him the phone. The message was from a local blog, the headline clear. "Millionaire Dr. Fun's girlfriend's dream project. Conflict of interest. Her throat tightened as Mac read it, jaw flexing. She stepped back. I didn't ask them to say that. I didn't even know they knew. This was bound to happen, he said quietly. But I didn't. I know. He held up a hand. I know you didn't. But people won't, she whispered. They'll think I used you. Frankie, this matters to me. Her voice cracked. Not because of you, because of me, because I've worked for every inch of this, and now... He reached for her, but she stepped away. I need to think, she said. Okay. He didn't push. She grabbed her bag, keys shaking in her hand. I believe in you, Max said, steady as stone. I know, she whispered before walking out the door. The sun had set by then, leaving only the glow of the exit sign behind her. Inside, Max stood alone in the studio, and for the first time since he'd met her. She'd chosen distance, not out of anger, but fear. And he couldn't chase her this time. He just had to trust she'd find her way back. The next morning felt heavy, like the air was thick with unsaid things. Frankie moved through the hallways of the hospital like a ghost in scrubs, smiling when she had to, charting when she needed to, but floating somewhere above it all. The article had made its rounds, whispers in the staff lounge, side glances in the cafeteria. Even Dr. Chen, usually oblivious to everything outside of his rounds, had paused when he saw her. You okay? He'd asked. She lied. I'm fine. But she wasn't. She hadn't answered Mac's text from the night before. He hadn't sent another one, which somehow hurt worse than if he had. By noon, she found herself standing in front of the pediatric recovery room, staring through the window at a little boy named Miles, 7 years old, stage 4 neuroblastoma, big brown eyes, too old for his face. He was sitting up in bed, earbuds in, nodding his head slowly to something she couldn't hear. Frankie stepped inside quietly. Hey, buddy, she said. He looked up, brightening. You're back. Of course I'm back. What are we listening to today? Billie Eilish, he grinned. Respect. She sat on the edge of the bed, careful of the IV line. Do you remember what I told you last week about movement? He nodded. You said even when your body feels tired, music can make your heart feel lighter. She smiled. Want to test that theory? His eyes lit up. Now? Now. She stood, extended a hand, and helped him carefully to the floor. They didn't do anything fancy, just sidesteps, little hops, nods to the beat. His arms were thin, but they moved with purpose. Frankie let him lead, let the music fill the cracks. And for a few minutes the room wasn't a hospital, it was just a boy dancing. When they finished, breathless and laughing, Miles gave her a high five, then looked up at her with the kind of clarity kids shouldn't have. You look sad today, he said softly. She blinked. I do? Yeah. Did someone hurt your feelings? Frankie crouched beside him. Not exactly. He leaned in like he was telling a secret. My mom says grown-ups forget that you can be strong and still cry sometimes. She swallowed hard. Your mom's a smart lady. Yeah, you should talk to her, he said, grinning. Later that afternoon, Frankie sat on the bench outside the ER, the same place Mac had found her after that long shift. The wind had picked up, brushing through her hair, tugging at her sleeves. Her phone buzzed, a message from Delia. You have every right to be hurt, but don't punish him for the things others are saying. He never needed headlines. He needed you. Frankie stared at the message for a long time. Then she stood. Mac's studio door was unlocked. She stepped inside quietly, the scent of paint and cedar grounding her instantly. The space was warm, alive with unfinished canvases, sketches tacked to the wall, soft music humming in the background. Mac was at the far end of the room, painting something large, back turned. He didn't hear her at first. Hey, she said. He froze, brush still in hand, then turned slowly. Hi. She walked toward him, eyes scanning the canvas. A coastal scene, blurry and bright, like a memory painted underwater. I didn't come here to fix anything, she said. "I didn't expect you to. I just needed to say something out loud." He waited. "I got scared," she said. "Not of you, of what it means to let someone stand beside me while the world questions my worth." Max set down the brush. "You never had to prove anything to me, Frankie." "I know. That's what made it harder. You believed in me before I did." He stepped closer, slowly, not assuming anything. "You still think you have to earn love?" She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes." "Then I've got time," he said. "However long it takes for you to unlearn that." Frankie looked up, eyes shining. "It's not your job to wait for me." "No," he said softly. "It's my choice." She let the silence stretch, the emotion settle. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, her finalized curriculum, stamped with the pilot program's approval. "I'm doing this," she said, "with or without applause, with or without gossip." Max smiled. "I never doubted that." She exhaled, stepped into him, and this time, when he opened his arms, she didn't hesitate. She wrapped herself around him like she finally understood he was real. And he held her like she was something fragile and fierce all at once. "I don't want perfect," she whispered into his chest. "Good," he murmured, kissing her temple, "because I only know how to do real." They stayed there, the rain starting up outside, the studio glowing around them, not fixed, not finished, but together, and that was enough. The hum of conversation buzzed softly through the community room as sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long stripes across the floor. Frankie stood near the doorway, her hands tucked nervously into the sleeves of her sweater, eyes scanning the freshly painted walls, the stack of mats in the corner, the speaker they'd barely managed to borrow from the staff lounge. This was it, the first official day of the dance therapy pilot. 2 weeks ago, this had only existed in the pages of her notebook. Now it was real, tangible, breathing. She exhaled slowly as the door opened and a nurse wheeled in, a young girl with a floral scarf wrapped tightly around her head. She looked no older than 9, pale, quiet, guarded. Frankie crouched down, her voice gentle. "Hi, I'm Frankie." The girl blinked up at her, eyes cautious but curious. "I like your scarf," Frankie added, smiling. "The flowers make it feel like spring." The girl's mouth twitched, just barely. Her nurse leaned down. "This is Lila. She loves music, but it's been a while since she felt like dancing." Frankie reached for the remote, thumbed the volume up just slightly, and let the soft notes of piano fill the room. "That's okay," she said. "We don't have to dance to be here. We just have to feel something. That's the only rule." Lila nodded, almost imperceptibly. Frankie smiled, heart already full. A few more patients arrived. Some walked, some were wheeled in. One boy, older, maybe 16, sat on a folding chair in the back with arms crossed, pretending not to care, but watching every move she made. Carla slipped in too, wearing a volunteer badge and carrying water bottles. "You ready for this?" she whispered. "No," Frankie whispered back, "but I'm doing it anyway." Mac didn't show. She hadn't expected him to. Not because he wasn't supportive, he was, but because he understood this needed to be hers. Her space, her rhythm. Still, part of her hoped he'd be there, standing in the back, quiet as always. The class began gently. Stretching, laughter, music that shifted from slow to playful. Frankie moved without pressure, showing more than instructing. She danced barefoot, letting the floor ground her, letting her joy fill the space like water rising slowly in a tide. And then Lila stood, just for a second, just long enough to move her arms to sway. Her nurse gasped softly, hand flying to her chest. Frankie caught the moment, the breath in the room tightening, and simply mirrored Lila's movement. No spotlight, no praise. Just one girl swaying in a beam of sunlight, and the rest of the world learning how to follow her lead. When the session ended and the room began to clear, Frankie walked to the window and let the tears come. Quiet, Steady, grateful. She stood, Carla said behind her. Frankie, she stood. I know, Frankie whispered. She hasn't in 2 weeks. Frankie turned, her voice trembling. She did it because no one asked her to. They hugged tight, laughter muffling the tears between them. Later that night, back at her apartment, Frankie peeled off her shoes, tossed her sweater over a chair, and sat on the floor of her living room. She still hadn't looked at her phone. But when she did, there was a text waiting. From Mac. Heard about Lila? I didn't want to be there and take the space that belonged to you, but I'm so damn proud of you. Come outside? Her heart stuttered. She opened the door barefoot, and there he was, standing on the front steps holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. I told you I'd wait, he said softly. She stepped out into the porch light, the wind brushing against her face like a kiss. What's that? She asked, pointing to the box. He held it out. Inside was a charm bracelet. Simple, silver, with one small charm, a tiny dancer. She blinked fast, the lump in her throat rising before she could stop it. I wanted to give this to you the day the program started, Max said, but I knew you needed to earn it for yourself. Frankie looked up at him, everything in her face open, real. I didn't do it alone. You didn't have to. She stepped closer. The box pressed to her chest like it held more than just a charm, like it held every moment they'd survived to get here. You saw me, she said quietly, before I ever knew how to see myself. I still do. He reached for her, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear. They stood on the porch, wrapped in the kind of silence that only comes when everything has already been said. And as she rested her head against his chest, feeling his heart steady under her ear, Frankie whispered the only words that mattered. Stay. And he did. The air outside smelled like rain and honeysuckle. Frankie sat on the back steps of Mac's house, knees pulled to her chest, bare feet brushing the cool wood as twilight settled over the mountains. The porch light behind her cast a soft amber glow, just enough to make the night feel safe. Inside, she could hear Mac moving around, slow footsteps, dishes being put away, the low hum of jazz playing through an old record player. It was their new rhythm. No declarations, no big plans, just presence. She hadn't planned to stay the night again, but something about last night, the silence they shared, the way his hand rested gently on her back while she fell asleep, had made going home feel unnecessary. She looked up at the sky, the stars blinking to life one by one, and whispered, I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. A soft click of the door. Mac stepped out, 2 mugs in hand. He handed one to her and sat beside her without a word. She took a sip. Chamomile, exactly how she liked it. Thanks, she murmured. He nodded, watching the horizon. You've been quiet. You've been full. Good full? She nodded, then paused. And a little scared. He glanced at her, his voice calm. Still? Frankie turned the mug in her hands. It's not fear of you anymore. It's fear of the future, of how fast things can change. We built this little thing, Mac, and I guess part of me is always waiting for something to knock it down. He set his mug down beside him. Frankie, I don't love you because it's easy. I love you because it's real. And real things, they're worth protecting, even when they get messy, especially when they get messy. Her breath caught. You said love. He nodded. I've said it before, maybe not loud, maybe not with words, but I've said it in every quiet way I know how. She looked at him, eyes shining in the dark. I love you too, she whispered. The words felt like wind in her chest, like something that had been building for months and had finally burst free. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I want to build more with you, he said. Not just dance rooms and slow nights. I want a life, a home, all of it. Frankie smiled, but her eyes flickered with hesitation. I want that too. I've spent so long being alone in my own world. I need to make sure I'm not losing myself in something new. Mac brought her hand to his lips. You're not losing anything. You're growing. You don't have to disappear to be loved. Silence fell between them again, soft and full. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Her breath hitched. What is it? Mac asked. She turned the screen toward him. An email from a regional health foundation. Subject, expansion proposal. Dance wellness program. She opened it with trembling fingers. The words were clear. We're impressed with your work. We'd like to explore funding a permanent program and bringing it to other hospitals in the region. Are you available for a meeting next week? Frankie stared at it, heart pounding, mouth slightly open. This is real, she whispered. It always was, Mac said. She laughed through the sudden rush of tears. Oh my God, this is actually happening. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. You did this. You. All of it. I want to tell the kids, she said, already thinking of Lila, of Miles, of that 16-year-old who still pretended not to care, but now showed up early and left late every week. We'll tell them together. Frankie pulled back just enough to look at him. You've always known exactly how to stand beside me, she said. I learned from watching you. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out the charm bracelet, the tiny dancer charm glinting in the porch light. You know, she said softly, this might be the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. He smiled. It was never about the bracelet. I know, she whispered. That's why it means everything. She leaned into him then, head resting against his shoulder as the stars above scattered like glitter across velvet. And in that quiet moment, warm mugs forgotten, the night folding gently around them, Frankie felt something settle inside her. Not just peace, not just joy, but certainty. This was her life now, messy, earned, full of love, and only just beginning.